I'm Veronica Dudo. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, new statement. For the first time, a statement reportedly from Iran's new supreme leader, the message it has for America and the world. Church response, we hear from several religious leaders about the ongoing war and what's being done to counter the violence. Plus, pastoral concerns, we speak to the Archbishop of Miami about an effort by the Trump administration to end legal protection for hundreds of thousands of migrants. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us. Our top story tonight. The Islamic Republic of Iran state media issued what it said was a statement by Iran's new supreme leader. The purported message comes following the death of his father and vows a policy of total defiance against Western forces.
I give this assurance to people that we will not forget, we will revenge on the blood of your martyrs.
The statement was read on state television and said that the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed as a defense against U.S. and Israeli airstrikes. The statement urged neighboring countries to shut down U.S. military bases, warning that those used for strikes against Iran would continue to be targeted. Since his appointment to Iran's highest office, Khamenei has remained out of the public eye, reportedly due to injuries sustained during the initial waves of the U.S. and Israeli bombardment campaign. Since the first strikes began, the Holy See has been adamant in calling for peace and dialogue. Now more church and other diplomatic leaders are speaking out about the war. EWTN News' Valentina Di Donato has reaction.
As war once again grips the Middle East, questions are mounting as to why the strikes are happening now and what the future holds. EWTN News spoke with Israel's ambassador to the Holy See, Yaron Seidman, and leaders in the church to hear their reaction on the ongoing conflicts. Ambassador Seidman says the decision to act came after years of diplomacy and dialogue failed to stop Iran's growing nuclear ambitions.
Pope Leo is absolutely right in saying that diplomacy and dialogue are the preferred routes for resolving conflicts. Those have been tried with Iran, and Iran manipulated them and used them in order to stall for time, deceive the world, and continue with its nuclear and missile programs.
But while world leaders debate military strategy and geopolitics, the Vatican continues to emphasize another mission: humanitarian aid and support for those caught in the crossfires. Cardinal Konrad Krajewski, the outgoing prefect of the dicastery for the service of charity, who was newly appointed by Pope Leo as the Archbishop of Lodz, tells EWTN News the Church has a unique ability to reach people in war zones, often going where governments and international organizations cannot. Through a vast global network of parishes and clergy, he says the Church delivers aid directly to those suffering on the front lines.
In the Gaza Strip, in Ukraine, in Syria, in all these places where there is war, we have a way to reach people. We don't do this through foundations or governments. We do it through the ecclesial work. When we send aid to Ukraine, the trucks go directly to church structures. The parish priests in different areas receive the supplies and distribute them to the poorest people.
The Vatican dicastery for the Eastern churches is also watching the crisis closely. It works to support Christians throughout the Middle East, many of whom are now living in regions increasingly threatened by instability and war. Cardinal Claudio Gugerati, the dicastery's prefect, says the concern extends far beyond a single country.
The area is not only extended to, let us say, Israel, but also to Syria, to Lebanon, all the areas where Jesus moved and where Christians live in the Middle East.
Those concerns are becoming even more immediate as violence spreads. Cardinal Dominique Mathieu, the Archbishop of Tehran Isfahan, was recently evacuated from his residence in Iran's capital after witnessing the first days of the escalating military clashes. Just one example of the dire situation many are feeling throughout the region.
All the embassies are putting a pressure on them, on foreigners in general, to leave the country because, as you said, it is difficult to imagine what's going to happen.
As tensions continue to rise, the Church is calling for prayer, solidarity, and renewed efforts toward peace. In Rome, Valentina Di Donato for EWTN News Nightly.
While under evacuation in Rome, Cardinal Mathieu met with Pope Leo XIV in a private audience. Cardinal Mathieu is the leader of Iran's Catholic faithful, which includes about 2,000 people. He was evacuated over the weekend when Italy closed its embassy in Tehran, which also houses his residency. The United Nations Security Council has adopted a resolution demanding the Islamic Republic of Iran end its egregious attacks on Gulf neighbors, labeling them a serious threat to global peace. The resolution, led by Bahrain, passed with 13 votes in favor and was co-sponsored by an extraordinary 135 other UN member states. Iran's allies, China and Russia, abstained and notably decided not to use their veto power to block it. The measure strongly condemns Iran's attacks on its neighbors, which include Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the UAE. The resolution also condemned Tehran's targeting of civilian infrastructure as well as ports and energy facilities in the Gulf region. Iran dismissed the vote, claiming its actions are purely self-defense. A major security incident is unfolding at Temple Israel in West Bloomfield, Michigan. Authorities report that a man armed with a rifle intentionally rammed his vehicle into the synagogue before a fire ignited. The suspect was reportedly fatally shot by synagogue security. As black smoke was seen around the complex, the Oakland County Sheriff confirmed no other injuries have been reported so far. Governor Whitmer has condemned the attack, stating that anti-Semitism and violence have no place in Michigan. Temple Israel calls itself the nation's largest Reform synagogue with 12,000 members.
We've been talking for 2 weeks about the potential, sadly, of this happening, so there was no lack of preparation. In addition, all Jewish facilities in the area are going to have a lot of extra presence around it until we figure this out.
President Donald Trump says stopping Iran from getting nukes is more important than the cost of oil. He warns an Iran with nuclear weapons could lead to world destruction. The president's comments come as Iran keeps striking ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is trying to inflict global economic pain to pressure the U.S. and Israel to halt their bombardment. But the Trump administration emphasized today the critical waterway needs to be and will be reopened. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports.
Veronica, some major developments tonight to report in the war, including Iran attacking commercial ships. Iran is trying to strangle the oil-rich Gulf region, and the Trump administration not about to let that happen. Under attack, an oil tanker erupts in flames in the Persian Gulf. Iran claiming responsibility for the deadly strike, raising fears about disruptions to global oil supplies. Energy Secretary Chris Wright assesses the situation.
We're in the midst of a significant disruption in the short term to fix the security of energy flow for the long term.
Iranian strikes effectively shutting down Persian Gulf oil exports. If the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, oil prices could, some predict, jump to $150. Secretary Wright saying what the world needs right now is oil in the short term.
You will see the United States working with other nations to allow the return of traffic through the Straits of Hormuz. That's coming. We're less than 2 weeks into this 47-year-long conflict.
President Trump posting today, the United States is the largest oil producer in the world by far. So when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money. But a far greater interest and importance to me as president is stopping an evil empire, Iran, from having nuclear weapons and destroying the Middle East and indeed the world. I won't ever let that happen. President Trump was asked this question by reporters last night at Joint Base Andrews.
Can you give us a timeline on when you're planning to tap the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, a timeline of when that could happen?
We're going to be doing it very quickly, and then we'll fill it up. We'll fill up our reserves.
For now, Iran has effectively stopped cargo traffic. Various ships near the United Arab Emirates seen here lining up off the coast.
All of our military assets right now are focused on destroying Iran's ability to wage war and terrorize the neighborhood. When we can afford some additional assets to move tankers through the Straits of Hormuz, we will do that. That's coming.
Veronica, President Trump also told reporters at Joint Base Andrews that on the war front, Iran is being decimated and destroyed, and that we have to win and win it quickly. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
With the Strait of Hormuz closed, a critical shipping route for much of the world's crude oil is now blocked. One of the nations feeling the effects is China, which imports millions of barrels of crude oil. So what does this mean for one of America's biggest adversaries? Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales takes a deeper look and joins us with the latest. Eric.
Good evening, Veronica. Yes, the implications are widespread. China is a major buyer of Iranian oil, some 60% of its total crude imports. Although there is conflicting information about whether China has stockpiled oil, at least one Iranian journalist tells me that this will hurt China's economy and give President Trump the upper hand in future trade negotiations.
It's the Islamic Republic who's shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, which is causing one of their main allies, be it China or other countries who depend on the Iranian oil, their sources are cut off. And President Trump has leverage now in his meeting with Xi Jinping.
Some reports show Iran has sent at least 11.7 million barrels of crude oil through the Strait of Hormuz since the war began, all of which was headed to China. Beijing's foreign minister says, quote, "This is a war that should not have happened, and it is a war that does no one any good."
It would be nice if China were strictly a friendly competitor, but they're unfortunately an unfriendly adversary. And what certain people have written out of China about being, unrestrained war, we need to be very careful with China.
China is now urging all sides to return to the negotiating table. However, other senators are already thinking about communist Cuba as the next country to fall, boxing in China even more.
What does Cuba have to offer to China? Intelligence, all kind of intelligence that they gather on us from a little island right off the coast of Key West, and they have hammered us for years.
Democrats continue their rhetoric that this is an illegal war.
He has no plan to end the war. He clearly had no plan to deal with the dramatic spike in the price of gasoline at the pump, and he is causing chaos throughout the entirety of the Middle East. And it's time to end this war.
No doubt the stakes will be high for President Trump when he meets with the Chinese president at the end of the month. Getting oil out of the Middle East won't happen quickly. U.S. Central Command announced that it might be weeks before the strait is cleared of mines and other dangers. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
As technology has been evolving, the face of war has changed forever. In 2026, drones are no longer just eyes in the sky. They are the backbone of the battlefield. From Ukraine to the Middle East, thousands of autonomous systems are launched every single day. Powered by AI, these consumable weapons hunt in swarms, navigating through signal jamming to hit targets with surgical precision. They've turned traditional defense on its head, acting more like flying bullets than aircraft. As military scrambled to field low-cost interceptors, the race for drone dominance is the new front line. Here to discuss the increasing role drones are playing in modern-day warfare is former Pentagon weapons analyst Chris Osborne, founder of Warrior Maven Center for Military Modernization. Thanks so much for your time. So first, the FBI recently warned law enforcement agencies in California that the Iranian regime and the Mexican cartels were both aspiring to launch some kind of retaliatory strike on the U.S. What's currently in place to deter such an attack if it were to ever happen?
That's such an important question, and thanks much for having me. There's been a growing synergy with local law enforcement, federal law enforcement, and of course the military to kind of look at homeland security in relation to military defense of bases. Drone threats to military bases have been around for a while, but they've gotten a lot more serious, as you point out. One of the reasons is drone swarms, this effort to overwhelm defenses with a volume of drones all at one time. So if you have, say, an interceptor or a weapon, that they're essentially overwhelmed, that you can't target a whole bunch of things at once. So the threat is really, really serious.
And we've been witnessing the rapid rise of drones. Their capabilities continue to evolve, and they're now a key part of combat. Are they being used in the hostilities right now in the Middle East? If you could just discuss how they're being used.
Yes, they are being used increasingly. And as you point out, that's an important point. They've gotten more sophisticated. Drones have hardening, meaning they're more difficult to be jammed. One of the best ways to defend against them is what the military loves to call kinetic and non-kinetic, meaning one is an explosive, the other is not an explosive. You can fire an interceptor at it. That is, costs a lot of money, and you can usually do 1-for-1 unless you use what's called a proximity fuse and blow up a bunch of fragments in an area to knock out a bunch of drones. The most effective and most recent thinking is something called non-kinetic, which is not necessarily an explosion. It's electronic warfare or high-powered microwave, where you can use electricity or electronics to essentially jam the drones. But the drones are now not just EOIR or sensors, they're also explosives. So they're designed to close in on a place, kind of like a suicide drone, and then explode and just cause tons of damage. And when there's a whole lot of them at once, it's very difficult to stop.
Now, we've heard that Iranian drones are being shot down by the U.S. military, and this is the Helios lasers. Can you talk a little bit about how they work?
Absolutely. Lasers is one of the really important innovations to counter against drones. And one of the reasons why it's scalable, they travel at the speed of light, and they don't cause necessarily a huge explosion or fragmentation. You can essentially, someone from the Pentagon once described it to me this way, talking about missile defense, you can literally burn a hole through metal with the heat of the laser. And you can scale it, so you can disable a drone or you can completely incinerate and explode a drone with the heat of a laser. You essentially burn right through it, and it travels through the speed of light. There are some limitations, especially with weather, because it's electro-optical, so it can't see through clouds and rain, but they've been around for a while and they're only getting better, and they're very important with the drone threat.
Chris Osborne, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me in this important topic.
We have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly. Pastoral concerns. The Archbishop of Miami weighs in on a Trump administration effort to end temporary migrant protections. And the U.S. is facing a wild weather whiplash. We have the latest. The temporary protected status of Haitians living in America is now in question. President Trump is asking the Supreme Court to let those protections expire for about 350,000 Haitians. Created in 1990, TPS protects foreign nationals who cannot safely return to their home countries because of armed conflict, natural disaster, or other temporary conditions. In February, a federal district court blocked the expirations from taking effect. The Haitians in question have lived in America legally for years. Joining me now is Archbishop Thomas Wensky from the Archdiocese of Miami and Florida, home to a very large Haitian community. Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us. If we could first begin, what is your reaction to this new announcement requesting the U.S. Supreme Court to allow the temporary status to end?
Well, it's disappointing. I would hope that the court does not support the Trump initiative at this time, because this would create tremendous pain, both in Haiti, both for the Haitians affected by the end of TPS, but also of the local community here, which today benefits from these people's participation in our labor force. These people pay millions of dollars in taxes. They are working in jobs that would be hard to replace them at. For example, here, the Archdiocese of Miami has several nursing homes that we run, and I have about 100 employees that are on TPS that would lose their jobs, and if they lose their work permits, and would be forced to go back to a very tenuous situation in Haiti, to the violence that is affecting about a third of the country, especially the capital area, where gangs control many parts of the neighborhoods, which make schooling impossible, et cetera, et cetera. So this would be sending people into a burning building, and that's not a that's the exact opposite of what the TPS provisions, when passed by Congress in the 90s, was designed to prevent.
Florida is also home to 1 million immigrant Cubans. President Trump has warned of a friendly takeover of Cuba. What are Cuban immigrants saying about this as they speak with family and friends back in Cuba who are effectively living under the communist state?
Well, at this point, Cubans in Miami are very hopeful that there will be some type of a regime change. And I would say Cubans in Cuba are also very hopeful. But everybody's a bit nervous too, because I think talking to members of the Cuban Church, they've always been advocating a soft landing for when necessary changes come to Cuba. They need a soft landing, not a landing that would be harsh, that would cause more violence, et cetera, et cetera. So, whether the Trump administration has the ability to engineer such a soft landing still remains to be seen. But right now, Cuba is being choked. There's no food, there's no fuel, there's no freedom, and for many people, no hope.
Do you think the Catholic Church could be a part of any negotiations between the Cuban government and the U.S.?
Well, the Church has been always there to voice the need for dialogue and for reconciliation. And right now, the Church in Cuba is cooperating with the United States because after Hurricane Melissa that affected Cuba several months ago, the first aid that reached Cuba was from the Archdiocese of Miami. We sent 3 plane loads of supplies, hurricane relief supplies, to that island. And then after our supplies got there, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, approved $3 million from the U.S. government. And for the first time in history, the Cuban government accepted money coming from U.S. government. It was going to be distributed through Caritas, which is the charity agency of the Church in Cuba. And after that first $3 million was distributed, the Trump administration also granted another $6 million for that hurricane aid. So the Church is a very important player in Cuba and beyond, again, saying that we should create conditions that will allow a soft landing, a landing that will aid the reconciliation of the Cuban people on both sides of the Florida Straits, and offer a possibility of hope on that island, which, when Pope John Paul II visited the island almost 30 years ago in 1998, he said that Cuba should open itself to the world, and the world should open itself to Cuba. And Pope Benedict, when he visited there, he said that Cuba is a home for all Cubans, and so therefore, it should be a place of hospitality for all Cubans, both outside the island and inside the island. And for that to happen, a lot of changes have to come about.
Archbishop Thomas Wensky, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Some parts of the U.S. experienced wild weather whiplash today. Just 24 hours after Washington, D.C. hit a record-shattering 86 degrees, the capital is now seeing snow. It's a tale of two extremes as a winter chill grips the east, while the West Coast prepares for a blistering, unseasonal heat wave. Meanwhile, a violent outbreak of supercell storms unleashed at least 4 tornadoes across Illinois and Indiana. Authorities confirm the destruction turned deadly. In Lake Village, Indiana, a mother and son were killed when a tornado leveled their home. The National Weather Service warns more rain, hail, and damaging winds are still moving through the region. Up next on EWTN News Nightly, Archbishop and Almoner Pope Leo makes a new appointment to head his charitable works. Learn about this new Archbishop. Welcome back. Pope Leo has named a new papal almoner in charge of charitable works for the poor in the name of the Holy Father, especially in Rome and in conflict zones. Bishop Luis Marin de San Martin is a Spanish Augustinian now elevated to Archbishop. He has been serving as the Undersecretary of the Synod of Bishops and replaces Cardinal Konrad Krajewski, who held the position since 2013. The office dates back to the 12th century and was elevated to the dicastery for the service of charity in 2022. We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Veronica Dudo. Good night and God bless.